Hi everyone, my name is Hillary Craven from Power of Work, and today we're going to kind of go over some clinical research terms from the ICH E6R2. Now, the main purpose of this meeting is we will just go into the glossary of this document that is a industry standard for people that basically gives you the entire guidelines on kind of like how to run a clinical trial. And this is a document that most experts, whether you're a physician running the trial, you're a high-up executive running a biotech company, a lot of people use this document. So this is really important. And I was helping somebody prepare for like a position that's higher than mine, right? They were going for like an associate director position, and I saw that they were actually studying this document and trying to refresh on certain aspects. So this is a document that if you get into clinical research, you will use kind of for the rest of your life. And so to be able to really know it will give you a huge advantage for any interviews. And a lot of people at this level do not really know this document that well. And so this is huge to being able to land jobs in clinical research. It also will give you a better understanding of certain terms, right? And so that's what we're going to go over today. We're just going to be focusing on the glossary of this document, and we'll just physically pull up the document and go through it. And then I have specifically one particular document that I want to show you that's related. And so, yeah, let's get started. So as I mentioned, this document, this is what they call this document. They say is the technical requirements for pharmaceuticals for human use is guidelines for good clinical practice. I have sent out a link to a good GCP training, which stands for good clinical practice. That's a common term within the industry. And so I highly recommend that you take this training, and it will give you a better understanding of the core concepts and why we have to have good clinical practice to protect the patients, right? Now, TMF is regarding the documentation for a clinical study. So this is just a portion of the document is TMF related, but if you ideally, TMF is a good start for your career, right? So you can go into multiple different directions from an initial TMF or a CTA related position. And so it is really important to really understand what a good clinical practice means. Now, I keep saying ICH, and that's the International Council for Harmonization. That is a term that you'll hear often, but that is basically like a general council that's just for like patient rights and to kind of help protect and standardize clinical trials across the board. So that's just a little introduction. And then this is the second version. It was about 30 years ago when they first issued this. And this second version talks a little bit more about document control, which is interesting because that's TMF. That's what we do. And basically, they're talking about a certain type of document called the case report form. But then also it talks about essential documents. And then and we'll go and we'll see there's little addendums to the document. So I will jump into it. So this is the actual document, and I've sent out the link, and I can send it out again. But then if you see, I'm going to scroll down real quick somewhere. You'll see little addendums. I don't see one right here. But if there's a certain section, right here. Sorry, that took a little while. Certified copy. And that has to do with TMF. And so this is one of the few items that were updated. And then they added in this definition on what a certified copy is. And so we'll go over this, and I highly recommend that you read through this entire document, 66 pages, it's a lot. But if you just start with doing the glossary, just to make sure that you are familiar with these different terms, and it's really important. So I wanted to give a little overview on this, and I kind of wanted to start with some safety aspects, and then kind of what steps you can do to be informed and how to kind of work through this, right? So we're going to read through some of these terms, but then what I want you to do is then go to the reference model link that we have. And in there, we have linked document examples. And so I want you to, as you read through these, trying to think about the TMF reference model and what documents might be related to these terms, right? These aren't documents, these are terms related to clinical practice. So an adverse drug reaction, which is up here, and that's a reaction to a medicine, right? And then adverse means that it's usually bad, and or we talk about like not being expected. So then down here it says CICH guideline for clinical safety data management. But basically what I'm saying is that you can explore this document and you'll learn a lot more about clinical research. And then if we can make sure that everyone's muted if possible. I know there's a way to mute people. But okay, and then an AE is going to be more of a common term. So it is an adverse event. And this is usually in reference to when somebody gets sick, right? And we talk about a SUSAR or a like a serious unexpected adverse event that occurs on the study, right? So this is when somebody gets sick on the study, which is not very often, but that's why I thought this would be good to go over, because it also highlights the importance that we're doing, right? So the role of TMF within clinical studies is to help manage all of the documents, but it's important because the end goal is making sure that patients are protected and that they got the drug and the drug was safe, and being able to basically have that documentation to provide to whatever agency that they're trying to get approval for. So for the US, that would be the FDA. And so these items are related to safety. And I kind of wanted to show you what you can do. You can go into the TMF reference model with links to documents. This is for Power of Work. And this is, as I mentioned, you can see that there's sample documents, and we can go into, you scroll, and you can see that there's all these different zones, right? And we've talked a little bit about this, but I wanted to go through and see that, so like zone 5 is your like site related items. And then you can have, oops, let me see what, zone 7 is like, yeah, zone 7 is safety. And then see here, there is an SAE report. So then we can click this and this should work. So this is what I'm trying to walk you through, what you can do to try to get a better understanding of what this is, right? So this is an SAE report form, and we just talked about from here, an AE, an adverse event, right? And so then here you can see this is a report form. So they are trying to report what happened at the study, and they say how here's the serious adverse event, what happened, and the dates, and kind of the relationship to it. And so this is an example document that's related to an AE. Now I also wanted to show you, this is a MedWatch form. This has to do with very serious ones that you need to report to the government using the specific form. And this is actually from a training done by the FDA, where the slide deck is. And of course, I can send this out if anyone wants to see. But you can see that they put in the certain aspects of what happened on into this form, right? And so that's pretty straightforward. But this is an example of a document related to clinical research and why it's important, right? So then we go, amendment is the next item. And then a protocol amendment is what we say, it says C protocol amendment. And we've talked about protocol amendments. And so you can even go to here, and let's see if this works. We can filter, and we can go protocol. And it's talking about protocol number here. Let me see if I can move this. But you can, when you're searching for this is going to pull up everything because the naming convention has protocol in it. But you can also, I wonder if you can just search just that column. Let's see. That's not gonna work. Okay, but basically, you can look for the protocol within the document. So here we go, protocol. And then protocol amendment. So basically, protocol, as we talked about, is a large document. Let's see if this works. This is the protocol synopsis. This is like a summary document of the protocol. So this is, and it has all these different aspects of it. And this is just a sample, but this is what a protocol would look like. And then this is the protocol synopsis where they talk about what it is and what they're testing. And then it's usually a large document, the protocol. And then an amendment is any sort of update made to the protocol. Now, from a TMF standpoint, if you are looking for making sure that all of your PIs, which is your head doctor for the site, is kind of compliant, they're up to date, they need to be aware of any amendments that are made to the protocol, right? Because the protocol is like a guideline that they follow in terms of how to run the clinical study. So they need to be aware of any amendments. And so then they make sure that they sign a protocol amendment form and also a protocol signature form. And those need to be collected in the TMF per each site, right? So that's something to be aware of, a potential document that's related to a protocol amendment. So I kind of wanted to just scan through here and pull out kind of what some items are. So like an audit is, when we've talked about this, we've talked about like audits or investigations or inspections. But basically, it's an examination of the trial-related activities and documents, right? And that the documents part is where the TMF comes into play. And so this is what the guidelines are for what an audit is. And basically, they're using an audit to evaluate if the study was done correctly. And then they have different items, such as the certification and the report. When an audit trail, we talk about this in terms of last week we went over the eTMF system and basically talks about how when you click different things or people have different access, that all comes up within the audit trail. And that is important for regulations and to make sure that things are done correctly. And so audit trails are important. And then we will talk later about the case report form. We'll do a training where we're going to kind of go over a couple different major topics. And so if you see items on here that you'd want to know more about, I recommend you explore the TMF reference model, right? And then kind of get familiar with the document. But if you want to know more about the documents associated, please let me know and we can add that to the next training. But yeah, so just really high level, the case report form, it talks about is a document designed to record the protocol required information. And we'll dive deeper into this, but this is really important. This is basically what gets pulled in terms of like the patient information, in terms of like how they're doing. So if you are doing a study, like something that I've done before where
what's up?
we
Huh?
Lauren, can you
I haven't seen her.
Lauren, can you mute your phone? Let's see. But
yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. And so if we can have so anyways, the case report form is really important. And so if you're doing something where it's a walk test and you're trying to give somebody a medication that's going to help their muscle development, and let's say before maybe they couldn't walk very well, maybe due to like a genetic disease, and so then they take the medication and hopefully they get better. So what they sometimes do is like a 6-minute walk test where they see how well they walk for 6 minutes, either like a time duration or a length, right? How long do they walk? How do they walk down the hall? And you know, that information, let's say the aspect of them getting tired or the aspect of them not being able to complete it or how long it took, that gets recorded in what's called a case report form. So that's an idea of what this is. Now, usually this is really patient specific. And so it gets filed somewhere else. So you wouldn't expect to see the CRF within the TMF, but you might see the template one, right? Or you might see documents related to how the case report form is administrated, or any sort of test regarding the case report form. And then, as we talked about, clinical trial. So you're investigating human subjects to intend to discover and verify the clinical, pharmacological, and pharmacodynamic effects of the product, right? So when people say the product, that's usually referring to the medication. And a lot of times we will refer to IP, like regards to IP shipment. That's the investigational product. And so that's basically what a clinical study is, and we're trying to make sure that patients are safe. And then on the TMF side, we're trying to make sure that everything's documented so we can prove this, right? At the end of the trial, there is a CSR, and that's a clinical study report. And this is usually written by the department called clinical science. And so that they're usually a group of doctors that are involved in the study, but on the end, in terms of being like, they're working at the sponsor company, the company that has the medication and is trying to prove that it's good. They'll have a team of people that compose of many different people, but also includes usually like a doctor that kind of help put together a specific report at the end, saying kind of the summary of how the study went. And the clinical study report being written has certain milestones to the overall kind of projection of a study in terms of when things get closed and things like that, and when we think the CSR will be written. So this is an important document. So it's good to be familiar with what a clinical study report is like. And then, so like compliance is in terms of, are they following all of the trial related requirements, but also so that compliance can be also on the patient's end, but can also be on the sponsor's end, right? Or anyone who's involved in the study needs to have good GCP, as we talked about, right? Confidentiality, we're trying to make sure that all the information is kept properly secure. And so that's why it's really important to have an eTMF, and making sure that you have certain people have access to it and things like that. That goes into the requirements for trying to make sure that the study is kept secure, and that no one's confidentiality in terms of their name, that, like I mentioned, the subject's identity, or any sort of documents that are associated are spread out, right? So then a contract, that's just like any other contract. There are lots of contracts within a clinical study. And then we get this question a lot: what is a CRO? I like to think of it as like a clinical research organization. They put contract research organization, but it's an organization contracted by the sponsor to perform certain sponsor-related trial duties and functions. So a very common CRO aspect is running the management of the monitors. And we went over this before, but the monitor, or the CRA is another term for it, is the person that goes out to the site and monitors and makes sure that the study is being run correctly. Some of the things they look at are making sure that the safety of all the patients involved, and making sure that the PI is, so that the main doctor is following all of the items outlined in the protocol and the investigator brochure, right? And we'll go over these terms, but these should already start to be familiar. And that's kind of the overall point of this meeting and this week's meetings, is to go over certain terms and to encourage you to go through this GCP document and really understand not only the document, but also just the terms, and to get a really good idea of what happens in a clinical trial. And so you can understand if you want a career in this, right? And then we have documentation. So that's what it's saying: electronic, written, all of the scans and any sort of data also needs to be captured. And then we have essential documents. And so we can say C section 8, essential documents, and we can do, we've touched on this, but we can do a separate training that we just go over these items. But these are the documents which basically they feel like these are the critical documents that permit evaluation of the conduct of the study and to be able to show the quality of the data produced. So while we'll go over the essential documents, basically any document that's created for the study should be captured somewhere. There's a site file where they keep the site-related documents that are for the patient specific, but then there's also the documents regarding like the internal, like the sponsor document. So basically any document that's involved in helps show the story of the clinical trial is important. Now we'll go over the TMF reference model in more detail, but there's also for example, meeting minutes. So any sort of meeting that goes on that helps the study get run, you need to collect all those documents and put those in the TMF. And then there's also a section for emails, right? And that's where their judgment has to be made. Any sort of email that has a decision made that kind of helps show the story of the study should be captured. And you don't need an email where somebody's just saying oh, hey, how was your weekend? So you don't need to put everything in the TMF, but it's pretty close to everything. Anything that's related to kind of the importance of showing the story of the clinical trial needs to be captured in the TMF. So that's these two options talking about the documents and the essential documents. Now we talked about GCP at the very beginning of this. It's a standard for design, conduct, performance, monitoring, auditing, recording, analysis, and reporting of the clinical trial. And the idea is to assure that the data and the report's results are credible and accurate. And it's kind of looking to protect the rights, integrity, and the confidentiality of the subjects who are in the clinical trial. So this is really important. And we want to make sure that this is basically the job of everyone involved in the study to have good clinical practice, but also making sure that, that anyone involved, and part of that comes down to the TMF, where part of what TMF is involved in is making sure that there's GCP training for everyone involved at the site level, right? We want to make sure that the people who are seeing the patients directly are fully aware of good clinical practice. Now they should be. Most of the time, these people are constantly doing clinical trials, and they're constantly seeing patients, and especially if they have a nursing or a doctor degree, they will definitely have gone through this multiple times in their life. But part of it is that we have to prove that, right? We've talked about essential documents and kind of proving the conduct of the study. We need to prove that these people who are working with these patients for the sponsor have the correct documentation. And then this next item is basically has to do with a board that reviews the safety in the data, right? We talked about in the beginning with AEs, where now this is a committee that would get together and look at these kind of things and the safety data throughout the study. And they also see critical efficacy endpoints. So for example, if there's multiple AEs and people are getting sick for something, this committee has the right to stop the trial. So basically they can pause this and say, you know what, we've seen too many things that aren't safe. We're going to stop the trial. Or in terms of endpoints, I've been on trials where they're dose escalations. And usually what they'll do is they'll give people a very small amount of the dose, but that realistically won't have a good won't actually cure the patient. But you also want to make sure that it's safe, right? Safety comes first. And so they'll give them a very small dose and they'll see how they do. And then this committee will get together and review the data, and they'll see the labs of the patients, and they'll see different aspects, if there's any AEs, things like that. And they'll come together and they'll say, you know what, we can now move forward. Everything seems safe enough. No one got sick enough. And there's certain standards, right? And then they go, okay, now we can do the next dose. So now they'll increase. Usually it's the same patients, but sometimes it'll be a separate trial where they start a new trial with new patients, giving them a higher dose of the medicine. And then they're very carefully watching to make sure that they are still safe and they're not getting sick. So part of that is also like, for example, cancer, right? You might think, oh, why would people do things if it's going to make them sick? They're already very sick, and so they're trying to not only help cure themselves, but they're also trying to help research go further, so the next person that might get diagnosed with this cancer might have a better chance, because now research has been done, and now they know, okay, at this medicine, this dose is actually still safe. And now they're going to see if they can do the next dose and if it will have an effect on helping reduce the cancer. So this is all really important stuff. And so we're going to leave off on this 1.25, and we'll come back and continue to go through this. And feel free to give me any suggestions or things that you would like to look at. But I'll probably still keep to this format unless anyone has suggestions, where we go through and we look at different terms. I'll give you some of my feedback and knowledge about it. And then if we want to, we can pull up certain documents that might be related, like today when we looked at the med report form and the SAE report form. So all of this is to help better your knowledge of clinical research and to help you understand the terms and the documents. And you have all these tools at your disposal to really dive in and start to really learn if this is a career for you and if you would be interested and start to really learn this material. So I'm going to head